We anticipate in the next 10 to 12 years approximately 8 to 6 million Hispanics coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the number 2 population for 400 years. You're going to get kicked out of being number 2. You're going to go down and become number 4. Now, common sense, even a third grade education would tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were number 2, you all jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're going to get when you become number 4.
President Biden, do you support reparations?
Well, I mean, since I haven't spoken on this chance, number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single continent. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 of our 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is that not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest. Which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. This is what we are faced with. And this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
We are owed $104 trillion on the very low end, plus $735 billion recurring. This number does not include the cost of about 50 Black Wall Streets that were decimated, nor compound interest from 2017 when Sean D. Rochester's book, The Black Tax, was published, nor the cost of Black life, nor the cost of living increases, nor the war on drugs, nor the current day pandemic. The number I'm working with is for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives.
Good afternoon on the West Coast. Good afternoon in the mountain. Good afternoon in the central. Good afternoon on the East Coast. You know exactly who it is, family. Angela Nirvana, your hostess with the mostest on the Reparationist Perspective, bringing you those Freedmen Had topics and making the case for reparations, making the case for weaponizing our vote, socializing our suffering. And today, family, I know you're wondering, why am I covering the war going on between Russia and Ukraine? Well, we've got to keep our head on swivel because it all concerns freedmen. I know y'all are like, oh, let's just go ahead and let the KKK and the Nazis just fund and kill one another. But we get to bear the brunt of all those refugees that are coming over into this country to become our next level of white oppressors in our own communities to gentrify us out. So we need to be concerned. Whenever this country starts taking up for neo-Nazis who were flying banners to free Chauvin when Mr. George Floyd was executed by the Glacier Donkey race soldier, you don't need to be buying into a country that is giving billions to Ukraine to fund the interests of Nazis, because that is exactly what's going on. These people hate us. Now, I'm not taking up for Putin's ass. Russians don't like us any better, but what I'm telling you is that they're making the case to whiten the browning of America, and this is the way they do it. This is the way this country does it. Now, over the history, just to give you a little backstory, Gorbachev told these people not to get involved, don't tie any parts of Russia to NATO, and the U.S. and NATO decided to do so because it's all about resources in the end. It's all about freaking resources. Welcome to the live. Please like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications. Before I get into sharing all the videos I've queued up to make my case as to why, although it's not us, we need to be very concerned. Okay? Basically, let me read to you what one of my Facebook subs wrote. I don't love him, meaning Putin, but ain't nobody going to let their enemies set up camp on their border with their gang, NATO, plotting to circumvent their revenue source, oil, the Ukrainian pipeline that Robinette has said the U.S. taxpayers will take care of with loan guarantees of $3 billion. His son Hunter was a paid consultant on the board of the oil company and got his dad to go there 11 or 12 times by Robinette's own admission. As soon as he became president, he signed an executive order to get that pipeline going to Europe. Doesn't have to depend on Russian oil and Robinette. Hunter and all their American and European friends can make a fortune off of free oil. Hi, YVOC Info. I see you, fam. Hey, Herb Saint, welcome to the live. And all their American and European friends can make a fortune off of free oil. No one wants to talk about that part, though. Let me tell you a little bit more of what they were sharing in the race book. I will tell the misguided why I love Putin. He kicked the satanic ones out of his country. You know, the ones that built the biggest slave ships, the ones that gave the foolish amongst us the Black Lives Matter. It is appalling to see it's the writing family. You know how it is on Racebook and stuff. It is appalling to see such Black people pontificating about world politics, and they are so wrong and lost as per normal. Damn shame. Lots of you are still Christian. What does it say about the synagogue of Satan? Putin is destroying the disciples of the synagogue of Satan so he can have some hush, please. Okay, I'm just sharing with you some of my people. Let me see some of what they were commenting on this. From day one, I heard about this story of Ukraine and Russia, how it started, when it started, U.S. roles, UK, and all the allies of NATO and nonsense. I ever wish a person of Putin will emerge in Africa. NATO and its allies are all evil and evil and evil. Putin struck them before they struck him. It reminds of it's the writing, y'all, it's the spelling. It reminds of this wonderful in Africa. Before you see monkey have seen you already. Okay, so let's see here. Here's another one I want to read to you. So he was responding to someone about what crimes against humanity, like what? What can a country do when America and the EU have given financial aid to terrorists to destabilize its country? The same tactics that have been used in Jamaica and Africa. This is the Great Awakening. Okay, the Bible talks about the last days of revelation and judgment. Now here we are. The Bible also says they have eyes, but they see not. Now, listen to this. Listen to this. This is something. A criminal comedy of suicidal errors. Western strategic thinkers who had warned of Ukrainian conflict. This is a compilation by Reid Bertrand. Okay, this was from the Twitter. Number one, George Kennan, America's foreign policy strategist, the architect of the U.S. Cold War strategy. As early as 1998, he warned that NATO expansion was a tragic mistake that ought to ultimately provoke a bad reaction from Russia. Number two, Kissinger in 2014 warned, he warned that to Russia, Ukraine can never be just a foreign country, close quote, and that the West therefore needs a policy that is aimed at reconciliation. He was also adamant that Ukraine should not join NATO. Number three, John Mearsheimer, arguably the leading geopolitical scholar in the U.S. today in 2014, quote, the West is leading Ukraine down the primrose path, and the end result is that Ukraine is going to get wrecked. What we're doing is, in fact, encouraging that outcome. Number four, Jack F. Matlock Jr., U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union from 1987 to 1991, warning in 1997 that NATO expansion was the most profound strategic blunder, encouraging a chain of events that could produce the most serious security threat since the Soviet Union collapsed. Number five, Clinton's Defense Secretary William Perry explained in his memoir that to him, NATO enlargement is the cause of the rupture in relations with Russia, and that in 1996, he was so opposed to it that in the strength of my conviction, I considered resigning. Stephen Cohen, number six, a famed scholar of Russian studies, warning in 2014 that if we move NATO forces toward Russia's borders, it's obviously going to militarize the situation and Russia will not back off. This is existential. Number seven, CIA Director Bill Burns in 2008, Ukrainian entry into NATO is the brightest of all red lines for Russia. And I have yet to find anyone who views Ukraine in NATO as anything other than a direct challenge to Russian interest. He was then ambassador to Moscow in 2008 when he wrote this memo. He is now director of the CIA, 2008 memo, and yet, okay, hold on, I got to go to the next. It broke up. Just a second, y'all. This is a mess because our country is lying like they always freaking do. They're liars. They lied about Iraq, but we all of a sudden want to believe these Democrats. I'm running down for those of you just joined. Oh, please like, share. Let me run my banner. Please like, share, subscribe. Turn on your notifications. I'm giving you the insight of why this is happening and why we're involved and why we as freedmen need to be very concerned. Because America with 3 Ks is about to import Nazis into this country. And who do you think is going to catch hell? White folks are freedmen. Back to the text. Not yet. Okay, Russians. Okay, it broke up. NATO enlargement red lines. Number 8. Let me move on because that broke up. Russian-American journalist Vladimir Posner in 2018 stated that NATO expansion in Ukraine is unacceptable to the Russian, that there has to be a compromise where Ukraine guaranteed will not become a member of NATO. Gorbachev told these Mickey Fickies not to do this, and now they're sitting up here scratching their proverbial balls as to why we're now on the brink of a nuclear war. And I'm not just telling you what the Russians had to say about this NATO thing. I'm telling you what our own band of crooked-ass leaders in government have been warning as well. The same thing. Let me finish. I'm almost done. Let's go back. Russian-American journalist Vladimir Posner in 2018 stated that NATO expansion in Ukraine is unacceptable to the Russian, that there has to be a compromise where Ukraine guaranteed will not become a member of NATO. See, this is considered when the U.S. and NATO get involved with this. It's an act of war as far as Putin is concerned. You have just declared war. Anyway, let me keep going. Malcolm Fraser, 22nd Prime Minister of Australia, warned in 2014 that the move east by NATO is provocative, unwise, and a very clear signal to Russia. He adds that this leads to a difficult and extraordinarily dangerous problem. Number 10, Paul Keating, former Australian Prime Minister in 1997, expanding NATO is an error which may rank in the end with the strategic miscalculations which prevented Germany from taking its full place in the international system in the early 20th century, I suppose. 11, former U.S. Defense Secretary Bob Gates, in his 2015 memoir, Moving So Quickly to Expand NATO Was a Mistake, trying to bring Georgia, that's in Russia, and Ukraine into NATO was truly overreaching and an especially monumental provocation. Number 12, Pat Buchanan, in his 1999 book, A Republic, Not an Empire, by moving NATO onto Russia's front porch, we have scheduled a 21st century confrontation. Number 13, in 97, a group of individuals, including Robert McNamara, Bill Bradley, and Gary Hart, wrote a letter to Bill Clinton warning the, quote, U.S.-led effort to expand NATO is a policy error of historic proportions and would foster instability in Europe. Today, it's fringe, traitorous position. Number 14, Pat Buchanan, in his 99 book, A Republic, Not an Empire. By moving NATO onto Russia's front porch, we have scheduled a 21st century confrontation. Number 15, Dmitry and Trenton expressed concern that Ukraine was in the LT, I don't know what that means, the most, I guess long-term maybe, the most potentially destabilizing factor in U.S.-Russia relations, given the level of emotion and neuralgia triggered by its quest for NATO membership. Number 16, Sir Roderick Lynn, former British ambassador to Russia, warned a year ago that pushing Ukraine into NATO is stupid on every level. He adds, if you want to, hold on. If you want to start, okay, here we go. I'm almost done. If you want to start a war with Russia, that's the best way of doing it. Number 17, even last year, famous economist Jeffrey Sachs, writing a column in the FT, warning that NATO enlargement is utterly misguided and risky. True friends of Ukraine and of global peace should be calling for a U.S. and NATO compromise with Russia. Number 18, Fiona Hill, we warned George Bush that Mr. Putin would view steps to bring Ukraine and Georgia closer to NATO as a provocative move that would likely provoke preemptive Russian military action. But ultimately, our warnings weren't heeded. Number 19, Alexander Dugin in 97 had predicted everything that Putin has done in his book, Foundation of Geopolitics. Everybody knew, family, that trying to rope Ukraine into NATO was crossing Russia's red line. But now people would like to hold up Russia as the villain. After having done everything to teeter on the red line, and this happened only after Biden came to power. Okay, I'll be back over to see your comments, but I got to blaze through here because I got a dinner date, so I can't stay on here long. Let's share the screen. I'm going to be stopping and commenting in between certain things to tell you how I see it. It is what it is. I'm pressed for time today. Hold on. I done changed this live so many times. Ooh, child, the ghetto. Okay, hold on. Hold on, y'all. Let me see where. Just give me a second, y'all. Oh, I got so many videos to show you to make my point that we need to be concerned. Okay, here we go. So this one's called report discrimination. Okay, here we go. This is Joy Ann Reid's nonsense. You know, the one they called us Russian bots. This is what they like to do, get these immigrants on the national screens and start spinning and doing all manner of thing to try to make it our fault that we are oppressed all over the world by this nonsense. Okay, here we go.
Who is an MSNBC senior national security and intelligence analyst, and Kimberly St. Julian Varnet, historian and PhD student at the University of Pennsylvania Department of History. Mr. Brennan, I want to start with you first because everything about this, as I think about it, it is literally the inverse of the Iraq War. You know, it is clear that they were not going to be greeted as liberators. Our intelligence was pristine, really seemed to nail it 100%. Biden chose to release that information, which seemed to block every avenue and every tactical avenue that Putin could have tried. You know, the failure was almost baked in because this man clearly didn't understand the people of Ukraine, that they want nothing to do with being an appendage of his country. It was failure, failure, failure. And I think I can't look past the fact that the American president really seemed to understand it and did understand Europe. Just give us your analysis of this, just as an intelligence failure on Russia's part and an intelligence success on the part of the United States.
Well, as you mentioned, Joy, Putin badly underestimated the will of the Ukrainian people to resist, as well as the capabilities to resist this Russian war machine that's moving in. In addition, he underestimated the international community's resolve to confront what he's doing here with very, very stiff economic, financial, and other types of sanctions, and to lend support, tangible support, in terms of weapons and other things flowing into Ukraine to resist this unjust Russian invasion. And so therefore, I give the U.S. intelligence community a lot of credit. Clearly, that was behind what President Biden said over a week ago, which was he was confident and convinced that Russia was going to invade. And so therefore, I think it reflects that Putin has had a very distorted prism of Ukraine as well as of the world as a result of his increasing isolation, brought on by not just COVID, but also his increasing imperiousness as far as this Masonic complex that he has. He believes that he is invincible. But I must say, as I look at what's happening now in Ukraine, there is no exit ramp for Putin. I think he realizes that he has now gotten himself into a debacle. And so the big question in my mind is whether or not the Russian military and Russian hierarchy are going to stand behind what is clearly Putin's war.
Very quick to stay with you for a second, John Brennan, because the thing is, if Putin escalates and just unleashes absolute violent hell on Ukraine, it makes it even more impossible to hold that country. Everyone there will despise him. The resistance will be endless. You know, the insurgency will be endless. And these are people that have access to outside information. They can get their perils out to the world. They have almost unanimous global support. It seems that getting in deeper and making his troops essentially kill potential family members and cousins, that seems insane, to be honest. Is that even possible that he's lost his tether enough to try it?
Well, I think now for him it's a question of survival. And unfortunately, I think he's going to be increasingly desperate and will reach for some desperate options. And again, the big question in my mind is whether or not other Russians are going to allow him to control their fate and to destroy Ukraine and to to bring down this tremendous tragedy upon the Ukrainian people. And so therefore, I am very worried right now because I think, as was said earlier, we're really in uncharted waters. And Putin sees that the corners are closing in on him, both internationally, inside Ukraine as well, but also I think the political recriminations at home in Moscow are going to start to increasingly put pressure upon him.
Let me go to you, Kimberly St. Julian Varnon. The situation in the world is the pressure is on all Western nations to stand vigorously behind the Ukrainians. You saw some of that tension play out in Great Britain today when a Ukrainian-based journalist really confronted Boris Johnson. But there's also these potentials for fractures. That this is one thing Putin is good at, is trying to dig into the fractures, particularly racial fractures around the world. There have been reports of Africans, of African students, particularly medical students and others who were in Ukraine studying, and also, just non-Ukrainians from around the world who study in Ukraine not being able to get out. We're just showing some of those pictures right now. And it's created an opportunity for disinformation and for fracturing the united support that there has been for the Ukrainian effort. What do you make of the potential for that to become a problem? Because we don't know who is doing the denying.
I think it's a really good point, and we're already starting to see the fracturing across social media where people are saying Ukraine is racist, so why are we supporting them? Or Ukraine is a white country, this is a white problem. And that fundamentally misunderstands Ukrainian history and the ethnographic makeup of Ukraine. Ukraine has Afro-Ukrainians, and these African students are residents of Ukraine. They're Indian residents of Ukraine, Roma residents. Ukraine is a multicultural, multi-ethnic country, and we have to keep that at the forefront. And yes, these videos that we're seeing at the border are horrifying, but we should also focus on the fact that there are a lot of people on the ground helping. A lot of people, including myself, are marshaling our connections on the ground to help these students get through and to get to safety. And many of them are getting through and getting to safety. We have to be very careful with how we frame this question, but also to the extent we allow our emotions drive our responses. The best thing to do is to try to navigate this as well as we can and provide resources, because Russia will take advantage of this and use it as if the disinformation, as we have seen with the George Floyd protests in 2020 and we've seen in the 2016 election.
And it's important you said that, because we've been talking about.
Okay, I'm going to pause that right there and show you, better than I can tell you, that these Mickey Fickies are on this MSNBC lying their asses off. Let me share with you a couple of key things, and you be the judge. Stand by.
Begging. The official literally looked me in my eye and said in his language, only Ukrainians, that's all. That if you are black, you should walk. I'm currently in Debrecen, Hungary. I got in like 10 a.m. today. Today is the 28th of February. It wasn't easy. On Friday at 8 a.m., I was on my way to Poland. I took a commercial taxi, and the taxi couldn't stay on the line of cars because literally cars have been there for 2 days. And when we dropped, on the Google map, it was saying a 1 hour walk. And I was like, a 1 hour walk is nothing, if it's getting us there on time. And we walked and it kept increasing. The term walking is traumatizing me. The term walking, I walked for 12 good hours, and it's not an exaggeration. The traffic warden saw me and said I should go to a shelter to sleep, and I slept. And he said the next day that there is a bus going from that shelter straight to the Polish border. And when it was time to get on this bus, the Ukrainians said, just Ukrainians, literally as a black person. I even lied that I was pregnant. They didn't care. I was begging. The official literally looked me in my eye and said in his language, only Ukrainians, that's all. That if you are black, you should walk. And that was an additional 8 hours from where we were. By car, it was like 30 minutes. So we had to walk additional 8 hours. The problem isn't at the Polish border, it is at the Ukrainian border. because you have to step out of the Ukrainian border to get on the Polish side. And the Ukrainians are only prioritizing their citizens. They don't care. They will push you. They will beat you. If you can make it, you make it. If you don't, you don't. Like, I took a nap and I still felt like I was still walking, like I hadn't crossed over. It's not fair. Like, I just begging to go. I literally had to go back to my city after that experience, re-strategize, and took a train to Hungary. It wasn't even easy getting to Hungary. You had to pay. Those that didn't have money to pay, what would they do? I couldn't help anybody because I was fighting for my life. It is a traumatizing experience, and I don't know where I'm going from now. I literally have to re-strategize in Hungary, try to get my ticket back to Nigeria, because it's not safe. This place is not safe. If your skin is dark, you're at a disadvantage.
Okay, so you heard it directly from her mouth. And let me share some other stuff. So as Joy-Ann Reid and whoever the coon she's got on as a guest sits up here and talks about Putin lying about these racist ass Nazis that this country is in bed with, I'm here to show you that they are flat out lying. I'm sure you guys have seen other people in the new black media, but we've got to show you the truth of what's really going on. Because this country is famous for demonizing everyone else for the bullshiggity that they do. Before I share another video, I want to read a little bit from this article that states Russia's Ukraine invasion may have been preventable. Okay? The U.S. refused to reconsider Ukraine's NATO status as Putin threatened war. Experts say that was a huge mistake. Now, of course, in the beginning of this article, they start white-splaining. How we got here. Basically saying that Putin refused to do things the U.S. way, the America with 3 Ks way. Putin refused to sit down here and negotiate away Ukraine into NATO. And that's what this country is pretending, that he was difficult. Listen, I ain't got a dog in either of these. Listen, I could give a damn if our people weren't going to bear the brunt of this. I could care less if these two racist devils kill each other. It would be fine by my soul if they implode and self-destruct each other. But we're going to be caught in the crosshairs of this bullshiggity as the U.S. uses our tax dollars to fund these Nazis over in Ukraine and then bring these refugees that hate us, as you clearly see the woman sharing with you about how she had already walked 12 hours and was told some misinformation, and they were beaten back, telling them they couldn't cross over into Poland. She literally had to go to Hungary, where she needed money. And she's saying that she didn't have enough money to even help those without the money to get out of there into Hungary. But it gets worse. Let me continue. So I'm going to skip past this part because they're white-splaining that Putin basically wouldn't fall on his sword and allow Ukraine to go into NATO without this fight that we now see. Now, I just read for you at the top of the broadcast the 5,000 ways folks were sending up flags and warning that this should not be forced to be made to happen, all the way dating back to Gorbachev. But let me just get down to this article because I don't want to read the whole thing. Hold on. But according to a line of widely overlooked scholarship, forgotten warnings from Western statesmen in interviews with several experts, including high-level former government officials who oversaw Russia's strategy for decades, the narrative is wrong. What narrative am I referring to? The one that Putin wasn't playing nice in the sandbox and allowing this country to negotiate Ukraine into NATO easily. Basically, he wasn't giving Biden his way. And that's the narrative that is wrong. Many of these analysts argue that the U.S. erred in its efforts to prevent the breakout of war by refusing to offer to retract support for Ukraine to one day join NATO or substantially reconsider its terms of entry. And they argue that Russia's willingness to go to war over Ukraine's NATO status, which it perceived as an existential national security threat and listed as a fundamental part of its rationale for the invasion, was so clear for so long that dropping support for its eventual entry could have averted the invasion. Recognizing this possibility does not, however, excuse Moscow's actions, which are heinous, nor does it mean Russia's insistence on regional hegemony is fair or ethical. And ultimately, it is no guarantee that Putin would not have invaded anyway. There are other factors included, but not limited to, Putin's general anger over Kyiv drifting away from Russian influence and domination, and his isolation as a decision maker that may have been sufficient to drive the invasion. But the abundance of evidence that NATO was a sustained source of anxiety for Moscow raises the question of whether the U.S. strategic posture was not just imprudent, but negligent. The fact that NATO status question was not put on the table as Putin signaled that he was serious about an invasion so plainly that the U.S. government was spelling it out with day-by-day updates was an error and potentially a catastrophic one. It may sound cruel to suggest that Ukraine could be barred either temporarily or permanently from entering a military alliance it wants to be in, but what's more cruel is that Ukrainians might be paying with their lives for the U.S. reckless flirtation with Ukraine as a future NATO member without ever committing to its defense. And now they want to use our tax dollars to help Ukraine get into the U.S. And you see how they're already treating the Africans. Analysts say it's widely known that Ukraine had no prospect of entering NATO for many years, possibly decades, because of its need for major democracy and anti-corruption reforms, and because NATO has no interest in going to war with Russia over Ukraine's Donbas region, where Russia has meddled and backed armed conflict for years, but by dangling the possibility of Ukraine's NATO membership for years, but never fulfilling it, NATO created a scenario that emboldened Ukraine to act tough and buck Russia without any intention of directly defending Ukraine with its firepower if Moscow decided Ukraine had gone too far. NATO and the U.S. have done this. As per usual, they create the problems and they want our tax dollars and our vote to be the solution while weaponizing immigration and refugees against freedmen to ethno-genocide us up out this piece. But for the West to offer to compromise on Ukraine's future entry into NATO would have required admitting the limitations of Western power. It was the desire of Western governments not to lose face by compromising with Russia. Anatol Levin, senior research fellow on Russia and Europe at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft and the author of Ukraine and Russia, A Fraternal Rivalry, told me. But it was also the moral cowardice of so many Western commentators and officials and ex-officials who would not come out in public and admit that this was no longer a viable project. The West didn't want to set limits on NATO's enlargement and influence or lose face. So what it did was gamble. The choice that we faced in Ukraine, and I'm using the past tense there intentionally, was whether Russia exercised a veto over NATO involvement in Ukraine on the negotiating table or on the battlefield, said George Beebe, a former director of Russian analysis at the CIA and special advisor on Russia to former VP Dick Cheney. And we elected to make sure that the veto was exercised on the battlefield, hoping that either Putin would stay his hand or that the military operation would fail. What happened has happened, and there's no going back, but it still matters. The U.S. must do everything it can to end this war, which is already brutalizing Ukraine, rattling the global economy, and could quite easily spiral into a nuclear armed confrontation between the U.S. and Russia if things get out of hand as swiftly as possible, including negotiating on Ukraine's NATO status and possible neutrality with an open mind. And over the longer term, Americans must realize that in an increasingly multipolar world, reckoning with the limits of their power is critical for achieving a more peaceful and just world. So expanding NATO was always hugely controversial. Let me pause there because I got, child, the ghetto. I am running behind. I'm going to stop that so I can come back and share some more. Yeah, that's another thing we really have to worry about is a nuclear war that's impending. This country wants those oil reserves. That's why they want Ukraine in NATO. And I got to do a little bit more digging, but allegedly, Biden and the crooked Clintons with 3 Ks have money ties to Ukraine. I got to dig on that story before I bring it to you. Let me say allegedly, for they scrap my entire video, of which they probably will already do, because nobody wants to tell you this side. You got to understand, if this country is for it, you've got to be against it. They're liars. Just remember Iraq. Anywho, let me get back over to this video I want to share. Hold on, y'all. I got so many windows open. Biased media coverage on Russia-Ukraine tension sparks. Okay, let me find the biased one here. Where are you at? Here we go. Stand by. Let me back it up because I'm going to read it in case people can't read this, okay? Because it's silent in many parts. So let me read. Western media's coverage of Russia's attacks on Ukraine and its comparison with other conflicts in Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Palestine has sparked anger online. It comes after some anchors and news guests were caught making remarks dubbed racist by many. CBS anchor Charlie D'Agata was severely criticized for these remarks.
This isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European.
D'Agata's comments were condemned by many as racist, following which he apologized.
I spoke in a way that I regret, and for that, I'm sorry.
Meanwhile, a guest on BBC is being called out for saying
European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles.
Another journalist, Daniel Hannon, came under fire for his article on The Telegraph, where he wrote, I gotta stop this. Hold on. They seem so like us. That is what makes it so shocking. War is no longer something visited upon the impoverished and remote populations. It can happen to anyone, writes Daniel Hannon. Similar views news echoed on Francis BFM TV. A French journalist was called out for his words on Russia's military operation in Ukraine.
On ne parle pas là de Syriens qui fuient les bombardements du régime syrien soutenu par Vladimir Poutine. On parle d'Européens qui partent à leur voiture, qui ressemblent à nos voitures, qui prennent la route et qui essayent juste de sauver leur vie, quoi.
So apparently, war is only okay if it's leveled at Black folks, Africans, who clearly are uncivilized and are too poor to fight back. And these are the kinds of races that will be imported here if this is allowed to continue in the manner in which these states in this country have been saying that they're going to welcome these Nazis into the country. They're coming to our communities to ethno-genocide us about this piece. I can promise you that. Let me come back over. Okay, I want to continue sharing this bullshiggity lies by Joy Ann Reid and her guest. Stand by where the Africans are concerned. And then I want to share something that's going to make your hair blow completely back. It's unconscionable. I cannot even believe, after this level of mistreatment, what the Nigerians are offering to do on behalf of Ukraine. Stand by. Oh, my God. The Stockholm Syndrome is real. Let me go back to that one video.
About this just in our meetings today on the show. And you know, what I said is that I want to hear from, you know, the African Union. I want to hear from specific countries that have students. And folks out there, listen to official information that's coming from these nations, not to somebody with...
Do you hear these lying asses talk about listen to official information? Basically, they're telling you not to listen to folks like me in the new black media. That's what they're telling you, that their bullshiggity, of which I just disproved, is official. Meaning their lies are official. Their lies are funded by the Biden administration, by the Democrat Dixiecrats. That's who their lies are funded on behalf of. While little old me and the rest of us in new black media are doing everything in our power to help you see things through a Friedman lens, to brace you for what's coming.
Lots of numbers after their title on Twitter, because that's not the best source of information. Just for your understanding of just sort of the way that this has played out. If there's an insurgency, in your view, in Ukraine, my sense, just as a civilian not knowing anything about this, is that it would be long and bloody. These people are never going to submit to Vladimir Putin. How dangerous does that make this ongoing situation?
You're right on both counts. And as I've said, as a historian of Ukraine and the Soviet Union, Putin will not control Ukraine until the last Ukrainian has taken their last breath. So I think that means we're going to see a long, drawn-out struggle. And, you know, I've said this before in other interviews, that also means our ethnic minorities, who are visible minorities, are an increased threat. I mean, we have not seen anything about the Russian behavior that makes us think they will be nice or take care of anyone that they happen upon, especially visual and visible minorities. So I would think that we need to kind of garner our resources, but also, and I've been saying this on social media, if you are an African or Indian or Roma resident of Ukraine, the best thing to do right now is to stay put and try not to cross right now, because, I mean, this is a war zone and it's only going to get worse.
Absolutely. And anything bad that happens.
So that's the best advice she can give the Africans, is to stay put. That's the best advice she can give Africans. First of all, it's not as many Africans as what it appears like me and the new black media are showing the videos of the horrors where these white Nazi devil glacier donkeys are pushing the Africans off the trains. You see mothers with their babies in freezing temperatures, sub-zero temperatures out there, forcing them to walk miles and then telling them they still can't come in, only Ukrainians. Mothers, babies, kids, men being treated lower than well poop. So that was the first lie they told, that it's not don't listen to us. We're not official because we're not funded by the Dixiecrats. We're not funded by corporate with 3 Ks, okay? So, first of all, it's not happening to as many as what we are sharing with you from the videos. That's not really happening. You don't really see what you really see, okay? That's number one. But number two, don't even try to leave, Africans. Just stay there to your own peril. Don't try to go anywhere. Just let them bomb you. I don't hear her telling this to the blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, which is clearly all these white satanic devils are only interested in protecting the lives of. Those are the only lives in Ukraine that have value. You heard it from the leadership's mouths. I showed it right here. And this coon sits up here and tells them to sit there and just wait to be bombed. I can't with that video no more. I'm done. I am just mortified at what they are suggesting. Well, they're not. They're blacks. They're getting their black wake-up call. You're not like these people. And they're making that clear. Let's share some more. Oh, I'm almost at 4. Lord have mercy. Let's see here. Is this the one I want to share? Let's see. Lord is so much.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. So glad you're streaming with us today as thousands of people flee the violence in Ukraine. Worrying accounts now of racial discrimination are being reported throughout the evacuation efforts. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees is now confirming to us that there are cases of discrimination in admitting refugees. One Congo native saying he was discriminated against while trying to board a train out of Ukraine. Take a listen.
They even told us, like, we are going to give you guns and you're going to fight for Ukraine. I said, hi, we're going to fight for Ukraine? We are not Ukrainian. We are black.
Ain't that about a blip?
How can we fight for Ukraine? If we fight for Ukraine, we are going to die first because we are black. One day we see, oh, look at those black people. I think they are from, they are from NATO. So we have to kill them first. So how could?
Not only will they kill them first, these Mickey Fickies, my belief, they are holding the people back, the Africans back, to go on the front lines of this war to protect their white asses. So you want to discriminate me against us. You want to discriminate and not allow us to get out, I believe, for the sole purpose of arming them to go out on the front. That's what I believe. Hold on.
They think that way. Come on. Ukraine.
Wow. Our ABC News' Marcus Moore with us now for more outside that train station in Poland. Marcus, I mean, here we are in the middle of a humanitarian crisis. People are still finding a way to dehumanize others, specifically others in need.
Kira, it is an ugly truth that is once again bubbling to the surface in the midst of a war, in the midst of a humanitarian crisis that is now unfolding here in Poland and Ukraine and in neighboring countries. And you heard from that gentleman there. He's 34 years old. He's lived in Ukraine for the past 9 years, originally from Congo. And he said he left the Republic of Congo for a better life, to escape the political situation, the strife there. And here he is once again now having to leave another country and is facing discrimination. Just a little bit more about what he said, Kira, that he and others endured as they tried to leave Ukraine. He is in Dnipro, or lived in Dnipro, which is just south of Kiev. And at one point on the train that he was trying to get on with so many other refugees, he said that the guards there said that only women and children would be allowed to board the trains that were headed west. And that then they saw that there were white men who were allowed to get on, but that the people of color were barred from getting onto that train. And it was a moment of disbelief for him, and certainly one of frustration. And he said that he would have gotten it on video, how the guards were aggressive, he said, towards the people of color, if he had had the time. But in the midst of the chaos, it was not his first thought to record what was happening. But certainly, as you know now, there have been a number of reports of discrimination that have unfolded in the midst of this mass exodus from Ukraine, and it's certainly very upsetting to him. But Kira, he said something very striking. For anyone who has been to that part of the world, and obviously the population is mostly white in Ukraine and in this part of the world, and he said that to be black in Ukraine, that you expect to be treated a certain way. And so on a certain level, he wasn't surprised by what happened, but certainly he was saddened and frustrated today about what they all experienced.
You know what, if you don't mind, let's take a listen to another part of your exchange with him, Marcus, and talk a little bit more.
It was clear. It was clear. Because we are black. That's why they were acting that way. Come on. We are black people in a white country. We already know the way they were gonna act with us. So for me, it's nothing.
Wow, that's amazing. It's nothing. You know, I wonder how many others are facing a similar situation, Marcus. I mean, could he give you any insight on that? Are you meeting others with a similar type of story?
Yeah, he said that if it was a person of color, man or woman, that there seemed to be a different experience for them, and that at one point, some of them were even pushed and shoved and beaten, is what he said. So, but in particular, he said that if you appeared to be from Africa, that you were subjected to clear discrimination, and even tonight, Kira. We have heard reports of incidents where people who appear to be from Africa have been harassed by members of right-wing organizations. Even tonight, and that there was an incident where the police had to show up to near one of the border crossings to allay the situation that was happening there. Don't have a lot of details on it, but we know that it's something that has occurred this evening, and it gives you some sense of the climate here and what these refugees who are already having to uproot their lives and go into an unknown future, some of them are being faced or met with just ugly discrimination as they try to find safety.
It's tough to hear, but Marcus, we appreciate you being there and giving us the story and in an in-depth way as well. Marcus Moore, thank you.
Okay, so more video footage dispelling the lies of MSNBC's Joy-Ann Reid and her coon guest, trying to allude to it's not nearly as bad as you're hearing and reading and seeing for yourselves in the social media spaces, calling us unofficial in the way we're reporting it, trying to minimize it, and to treat them in this way, and then to turn to them to put a gun in their hands to go up against Russia. Ain't that about a blip? We just get to be used as mules all over the world. Let's go to another headline real quick. Please like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications. If you feel so compelled, bless the broadcast. You guys know I'm being shadow banned. I'm relying on you to help get the truth out. Because they are clearly liars. This country with 3 Ks is clearly lying and getting freedmen up in a lather over white folks. Why? Have they ever cried for any time they execute us with impunity? You got a whole president that 87% of y'all put into office who can't even mention the word black at the State of the Union address. He ain't mentioned black since he lied about closing the racial wealth gap and since he lied about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Well, I don't think he ever gave a damn about the racial wealth gap, but that's the Dixiecrats who was back in 2020 talking about closing the racial wealth gap. Oh, you closed it for everybody but freedmen whose ancestors built the country with their lives. But I digress. I'm running out of time. So where am I going to go now? Let's talk about these foolish Nigerians who want to sign up to fight this war for the Ukrainians who have clearly given them their ass to kiss. I tell you, the Stockholm Syndrome is real. And then we'll go into what America is doing about it to help these Nazis get into this country and giving them all manner of resources that should be going to those of us who are over 50% of the homeless families in this country and, you know, on every skid row in every major state throughout the country. That's where the money should be going instead of to crack programs, to line the pockets of white and immigrant-run drug programs to help the opioid addicted in the name of the crack epidemic that they ended with the grave and with the private prison industrial complex, where we are serving as the not-so-new slaves in the private prison industrial complex. They could have used all this money they've been giving away to line their own pockets on refugees and immigrants to give us the homes that they've taken by way of institutional systemic racism. Give us federal jobs guarantees. Give us quality schools with our public school dollars over the preschool to prison pipeline, which is now white and immigrant run. They've driven 200,000 teachers up out the country. They're all gone. So our babies, I tell you, Princess Jones, I see you, fam. Thank you for joining the line. Listen, so our babies get to be set up for prison. Our babies are the largest groups in the juvenile detention centers, in the foster care system where they're suffering all manner of abuses, right? But let's give the money to line our own pockets, to get more Nazis in the country, to whiten up the browning of the country, since we've pissed off the poor whites who feel their skin, their complexion is their privilege, while they're, dying disproportionately as well from opioid addictions and poverty and the like. But they somehow think their whiteness makes them superior. Let's just flood the zone and continue to ethno-genocide freedmen, overspending the money on the most compromised group by way of institutional systemic racism. Okay, anywho, back to the text. What was I about to share something? Hold on, y'all. I was sharing that one, and let me go back to it. Let's talk about these foolish ass Nigerians. Oh, God. I'm going to keep that up so I can talk in the other. Just a second. I'll read from the other tab. Just a second. Paste and go. Okay, let me come back over here and make sure y'all can see a little bit more of me while I speak on it. Okay. Woo, child, the ghetto. So, Nigeria, Russia-Ukraine war, 200 Nigerians applied to join Ukrainian army as government evacuates 2,090 today. Now, they got their own wars. They got their own Holocaust, but they want to go save the blonde-haired, blue-eyed devils. Okay, let's get into the article. Nearly 200 Nigerians have volunteered to be recruited into the Ukrainian army to help the country resist the invasion by Russia, which entered its 7th day yesterday. Leadership visited the Ukrainian embassy in Abuja yesterday and can authoritatively confirm that the number of Nigerian volunteers is increasing and might hit 400 before the week runs out. A source who does not want his name on print because he is not authorized to speak on the matter told our correspondent that about 200 Nigerians have applied to go and fight for Ukraine in the struggle against Russian invasion, and the number is increasing. So they're on a suicide mission, clearly. Okay. He said the government of Ukraine had shortlisted about 100 who are the most qualified because the Ukrainian government has more preference for ex-servicemen and those with military background and can handle weapons. Okay, so they're not fighting the wars in their own hot damn country. They're either running away to somewhere white to save whiteness, or they're getting enough money amassed and education and training to invade this country with the help of our government to get position in high places over us, then call us a kata and the like, and pretend, along with white systemic racism, that we're just not trying hard enough. We're not pulling ourselves up fast enough by our bootless straps. And oh, wait, look at me. Look at how well I'm doing. What's wrong with you? After selling us into slavery. Back to the text. The source, however, said that the volunteers will have to first sponsor themselves to Poland, where Ukrainian officials are waiting for men with all the necessary incentives, including military equipment and training, before they would be deployed to the battlefield. Okay, so now you've got to pay your own way to your own suicide mission. Oh, child, the ghetto. He added that all necessary arrangements for their payment and other motivations had been made by Ukrainian authorities. I think it costs about $1,000 for them to get over here to fight for these these blonde-haired, blue-eyed Nazis. Okay. Also speaking on that matter, Second Secretary at the Ukrainian Embassy in Abuja, Bohdan Soltis, told leadership that the embassy was compiling the list of eligible volunteers, adding that over 100 applications had been received by the embassy as of yesterday. He, however, said that the embassy had not received specific instruction from the Ukrainian government on what to do next, and therefore cannot comment on the sponsorship of the Nigerians. He said, because we don't have any specific instruction from the Ukrainian government, what we do now is we make a list of people who want to volunteer and wait for our government to give us instruction on what to do. We have received over 100 applications from Nigerians who want to join the Ukrainian army to fight Russia. Bohdan Soltis also disclosed that about 370 Nigerian students are trapped in a Ukrainian city as Russian forces intensify their assault on Ukrainian cities. They're not trapped. You won't let them go. In an interview with leadership yesterday, he said that the students in the city of Sumy have been trapped and had no easy exit because the city had been surrounded by Russian troops. After you would not let them board the trains to get out and advise they walk how many miles? How many miles? 10,000 miles? The woman said she walked for 12 hours and then was told to walk another 8 because they wouldn't let her into Poland. He urged the Nigerian government and the international organizations, especially humanitarian agencies, to act urgently to save the beleaguered Nigerian students from the rampaging and vicious Russian troops. But talks nothing about the Nazi Ukrainians that would not let them out. That said they want to focus on Ukrainians, not y'all. Sumy University is one of the best universities in Ukraine and has hundreds of Nigerian students. 370 Nigerian students are stranded in the city because it is now surrounded, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari has approved $8.5 million for the immediate evacuation of at least 5,000 Nigerians fleeing the Ukrainian war. So he's paying a big penny to get the Nigerians out, 5,000 of them. I hope they get them out. Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Zubaru Dada, said the approval was issued yesterday at the Federal Executive Council meeting presided over by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo. Okay, but you heard Reid, Joy-Ann Reid, and her guests say this was not a big problem, right? The Nigerian public is today expecting the evacuation of Nigerians who have found their way to Hungary, Poland, Hungary, and other Eastern countries as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, a move that has elicited global condemnation and sanctions. 2,090 Nigerian evacuees to arrive today. The federal government has commenced the evacuation of Nigerians affected by the Ukraine war. About 2,090 Nigerian evacuees are expected in the first batch of those to be repatriated home today from countries surrounding Ukraine. Minister of Foreign Affairs Godfrey Onyeme had said there was about 8,000 Nigerians in Ukraine, 5,000 of whom were students, adding that the federal government had tipped Air Peace and Air Max to airlift the Nigerians who wanted to be evacuated. However, in a press statement by the permanent secretary, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Gabriel Aduba, he said the chartered flights for Max and Air Peace would depart yesterday, March 2nd, to pick up Nigerians and bring them back home. Okay, I'm tired of reading that. It's a nightmare. But Joy-Ann Reid, MSNBC, with their lying asses, want to sit up here and tell you this is not a problem. Just a couple of people that can't get out. We're official. Don't listen to those unofficial ones in the new black media and in Twitter and all over social media. Don't believe your lying eyes. So let me tell you what the U.S. is planning to do to justify more immigration over paying reparations. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians can stay in the U.S. without fear of deportation. Okay? That's one thing. So, tens of thousands. They won't be deported. They're not citizens yet. The Biden administration will grant temporary protection from deportation to tens of thousands of Ukrainians who are already living in the U.S. Overpaying the much needed reparations that are owed, a debt that is owed. This is the way they're using our reparations. Okay. The Department of Homeland Security announced Thursday that it has designated Ukraine for temporary protected status, or TPS, that will allow an estimated 30,000 Ukrainians who are temporarily living or studying in the U.S. to stay and work legally for 18 months. We know where this is leading, family. Russia's premeditated and unprovoked attack on Ukraine has resulted in an ongoing war, senseless violence, and Ukrainians forced to seek refuge in other countries, said Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas in a statement. See what happens when you let the immigrants take over your country? You get slammed with more of this nonsense. This was not premeditated, and it was not unprovoked. If you just got here and listened to the top of the broadcast. In these extraordinary times, we will continue to offer our support and protection to Ukrainian nationals in the United States. I'm tired of that one already. I just want to show you what we're being set up for, family. More ethno-genocide. Let me share this next one. U.S. states step up to offer safe harbor to Ukrainian refugees. Hold on. Let me make sure y'all can see that. Please like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications. Thank you for joining the live. Just a second, y'all. These ads are driving me nuts. I don't think I can stop it. This is what the lamestream, the corporate with 3 Ks, lamestream media is not showing y'all. And this is why you need to be concerned. Immigration and refugees are almost imminent threat as a lineage. Our numbers are on the decline. Their numbers are growing. As the United Nations agency reports that more than 1 million people have fled, 1 million people have fled Ukraine, U.S. governors say they will welcome Ukrainians, directing state agencies to prepare for their arrival and asking federal officials for help. Support for Ukraine remains high among U.S. officials and the public a week into Russia's invasion of the country. Now state governors are preparing for the arrival of Ukrainians who will need shelter and jobs after escaping violence in their home country. So here we sit, family. Of the homeless families in this country, over 50% are freedmen. We have the highest rates of unemployment. And now the state governors are preparing for the arrival of Ukrainians who need what? The very thing freedmen need. Shelter and jobs. Yet we don't get to escape the violence perpetuated against us on a regular daily basis. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy said on Twitter Wednesday he sent a letter to President Joe Biden following his State of the Union address affirming his state would take in Ukrainian refugees. Murphy wrote in his letter that New Jersey is already home to nearly 75,000 residents of Ukrainian descent, many of whom fled the former Soviet Union. Now Murphy wrote that the state will be proud to do our part in welcoming Ukrainians who have left their homes in the face of Russia's cruel and illegitimate invasion. The Democratic governor asked the Biden administration for safeguards that will protect Ukrainians already in the country from deportation. He also asked for work permits to those in the country on student visas or those covered by a special program for immigrants taken to the U.S. as children. New York Governor Kathy Hochul said during a speech Wednesday at St. George Ukrainian Catholic Church in New York City that her state is already home to the country's largest population of people of Ukrainian descent. Me speaking, and yet freedmen black have been driven right up out that piece. They have never been made whole from Seneca Village, which is now Central Park. They've been legislated up out of New York. It has been taken over by immigrants and white folks. But they're ready to take in more, she said. We stand together to open up the arms of our Statue of Liberty to all Ukrainians who want to come here for refuge as we work to rebuild the country after driving the Russians out, because that will be what happens, Hochul said to Applause. Colorado Governor Jared Polis last week signed an executive order directing his state's Office of New Americas to look into housing, employment, and other resources of Ukrainians. Polis also said his administration would no longer recognize the Russian embassy and consulate. Colorado will welcome Ukrainian refugees, Colorado is home to approximately 11,000 Ukrainian Americans who can help us support Ukrainian refugees, Polis said in a letter to U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Our state has a long history of resettling refugees. Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb on Monday said, signed an executive order directing a review of state contracts or investments with any Russian entity. The order also said the state was all ready to support Ukrainian people affected by the invasion. Should a federal police program or initiative be implemented that requires or includes, for example, access to locations in Indiana? Rhode Island Governor Daniel McKee wrote to Biden earlier this week saying that his state was prepared to welcome Ukrainian refugees. They should know that they can find solace and safety in our state, he wrote. Washington Governor Jay Inslee ordered state agencies to review contracts to find out if the state is doing business with Russia. Additionally, legislative leaders are seeking an additional $19 million to provide services to Ukrainian refugees, reports the state. Officials in California, New York, and Colorado said they would also evaluate state contracts with the goal of not supporting Russian business. Utah Governor Spencer Cox ordered all Russian vodka to be pulled from the state-run liquor stores. Utah stands in solidarity with the Ukrainians and will not support Russian enterprises, no matter how small the exchange. However, it's not clear just what the impact Ukrainian refugees will have. The reality of us getting Ukrainian refugees at this time is probably pretty low, said Natalie L. Dieri, executive director of the International Rescue Committee in Salt Lake City, told the paper. Liars. And let's see here. They're sitting up here doing these sanctions. Guess what? Putin considers that an act of war. I'm reading from Reuters. Putin says Western sanctions are akin to a declaration of war. He said on Saturday that Western sanctions on Russia were akin to a declaration of war and warned that any attempt to impose a no-fly zone in Ukraine would lead to catastrophic consequences for the world. Putin reiterated that his aims were to defend Russian-speaking communities through the demilitarization and denazification of the country so that Russia's former Soviet neighbor became neutral and no longer threatened Russia. Ukraine and Western countries have dismissed this as a baseless pretext for the invasion he launched on February 24th and have imposed a sweeping range of sanctions aimed at isolating Moscow. Quote, these sanctions that are being imposed are akin to a declaration of war, but thank God it has not come to that, Putin said, speaking to a group of flight attendants at an Aeroflot training center near Moscow. He said any attempt by another power to impose a no-fly zone in Ukraine would be considered by Russia to be a step into the military conflict. Such a step, he said, would have catastrophic consequences for Europe and the world. The NATO military alliance has rejected Kyiv's request for a no-fly zone on the grounds it would escalate the war beyond Ukraine into a far wider conflict, potentially pitting the U.S. against Russia. Asked about reports that Russian conscripts have been used in Ukraine, Putin said none have been involved and said the military operation was going to plan. There is not one conscript, and we don't plan for there to be, Putin said. Our army will fulfill all the tasks. I don't doubt that at all. Everything is going to plan. Okay, I don't have time to read that whole article, but you can look it up in Reuters. And let me see, my last thing I want to share. I'm running so behind. Okay, hold on. I read somewhere. Let me see here. I guess I shut it down, maybe. Hold on. Biden. Okay, so I'd already shared with you. Listen, remember that I just shared with you guys that Biden was asked Congress for $6.4 billion. That price tag has increased to $32.5 billion. Let's share that screen. This affects us, y'all. They're using our reparations to make everyone but us American. Hi, Satra Delray 360. Michael Screen Machine Evans. Ooh-wee. Stand by, y'all. This is the last one. I got to go. Lord. Okay, hold on. Lord, no. I don't want this. Oh, Lord, they want you to subscribe every time you turn around. Maybe PBS will be more friendly. Hold on. Okay, he seeks $10 billion for aid. Biden seeks $10 billion for aid to Ukraine, $22.5 billion for COVID expenses. I don't know what one's got to do with the other. The Biden administration is seeking another $10 billion to help protect Ukraine against the Russian invasion and an additional $22.5 billion to cover coronavirus pandemic-related expenses. Two major additions to budget talks already underway. Money was okay. Young said in the blog post that the money was urgently needed. The $10 billion to Ukraine would be a rapid escalation of the $1.4 billion provided by the U.S. since 2021, a reflection of the crises caused by the Russian offensive that began last month. Young said the money would cover additional humanitarian, security, and economic assistance in Ukraine and the neighboring region in the coming days and weeks. Last week, Biden administration officials told congressional aides that their request would include $3.5 billion for the Pentagon and $2.9 billion for humanitarian aid, as Russia's invasion has caused more than 1 million Ukrainian refugees to flee their country. The $22.5 billion tied to the coronavirus would pay for testing, treatments, and vaccines, as well as investments in research and efforts to increase vaccinations worldwide. There have been expectations that the request was going to be for as much as $30 billion, which comes after lawmakers in the Biden and Trump administrations committed a combined $5.8 trillion over multiple years on the pandemic, according to the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Well, that's Tim. Okay. They spent $6.8 trillion last fiscal year, due in large part to the emergency measures tied to the coronavirus that included Joe Biden $1.9 trillion relief package before the COVID-19 pandemic. The federal budget was about $4.4 trillion, according to the Congressional Budget Office. Okay, that's enough of that. Basically, he's pouring more money into Ukraine as the country opens up to receive them and are looking towards the government, the feds, to actually help supply them with housing and more jobs, while we are the highest rates of unemployed and suffer the highest rates of homelessness in the country our ancestors built with their lives. With that being said, family, I am truly out of time. I don't see a lot of comments in the chat. Please like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and know that we cannot afford to bury our heads with a nuclear war impending and the fact that the weaponization of immigration to ethno-genocide freedmen right up out the country our ancestors built with their lives. It's real, and it's happening in real time. What you're observing is the whitening of the browning of America with 3 Ks to the peril of freedmen. Our numbers are declining, their numbers are growing. With that being said, family, the light of God, thank you for joining the broadcast today. I appreciate you joining the live. I do want you to know that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever Freeman and its allies are, God truly is, because family, you are the face of God, you are the voice of God, you are the body temple of the Spirit of the living God. If no one's told you today, family, know this, that I love you black and I love you so strong. Until we meet again tomorrow, you make it a beautiful God-inspired rest of your evening. Until then, family, I'm bidding you a ton of peace, love, and reparations, reparations, reparations.